My friends, tonight I've come to tell you something that will shake the very core of your soul. God is here. He's not far away. He's not distant. He's not watching from the clouds. He is here, surrounding you right now. You may not see him with your eyes, but I tell you, he is closer than the breath in your lungs. And tonight, some of you are going to feel his presence like never before. Have you ever felt like you're walking through life alone? Like nobody truly sees you, nobody truly understands the weight you carry on your shoulders? Maybe you wake up in the morning with 1,000 thoughts racing through your mind, wondering if anybody even notices the silent battles you're fighting. But let me tell you something. You are not alone. You have never been alone. There is a presence, a divine presence that surrounds you at this very moment. Whether you feel it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not, it is there. It has been there since the day you took your first breath, and it will never leave you. Think about the air around you. You don't see it, but you breathe it in every second of the day. You don't question its presence, because without it you wouldn't survive. God's presence is like that. It surrounds you constantly, giving you life, strength, and direction, even when you're unaware of it. You might say, but I don't feel him. I don't see any signs. If God is with me, why do I still feel empty? Why do I still feel lost? Oh, my friend, that's exactly what the enemy wants you to think. He wants to convince you that you are alone, that you are forgotten, that God has abandoned you. But let me tell you the truth. God is closer to you than you could ever imagine. Remember when you were going through that tough season in your life? When you cried yourself to sleep at night and you thought no one cared, God was there. When you lost that loved one and it felt like your world had collapsed, God was holding you up even when you didn't realize it. When you failed, when you stumbled, when you made mistakes and thought you had ruined everything, he was still there, whispering, I'm not done with you yet. Look at the sun rising every morning. Did you have to ask for it to rise? Did you have to beg for light to fill the sky? No. It happens every single day without fail, because God has set his creation in motion, and his presence is just as faithful as the rising sun. Have you ever been in a situation where you narrowly avoided disaster? Maybe you almost had a terrible accident, but someone intervened. You call it coincidence, you call it luck, but let me tell you the truth. It was God's presence shielding you. I remember hearing a story of a man who was driving late at night, exhausted, barely able to keep his eyes open. Just before he drifted into oncoming traffic, something startled him awake. A jolt, a sudden push, as if an unseen hand grabbed the wheel. He swerved just in time, heart pounding, realizing he had almost died. That wasn't an accident. That was the presence of God. How many times have you been at the breaking point, convinced that you had no strength left to go on, yet somehow you made it through? That was God holding you up. You thought it was just your own resilience, but it was his presence sustaining you step by step, breath by breath. Even in the ordinary moments of life, he is there. When you sit at your kitchen table drinking your morning coffee, when you walk outside and feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, when you hear the laughter of a child, that is God's presence reminding you, I am here. But the problem is, we often look for dramatic signs, for something supernatural and overwhelming to convince us that he is near. We want burning bushes. We want the heavens to split open. But God doesn't always reveal himself in grand gestures. Sometimes he comes in a whisper. Do you remember the story of Elijah, the prophet, who was desperate to hear from God? He stood on the mountain, and a mighty wind tore through the rocks. But God wasn't in the wind. Then an earthquake shook the ground, but God wasn't in the earthquake. Then a raging fire swept across the land, but God wasn't in the fire. And then, after all the noise, came a still small voice, and that was where God's presence was found. That's how it is with us. God is not just in the miracles and the breakthroughs. He is in the quiet moments, the ordinary days, the simple, unshaken truth that he has never left you. Think about a little child walking with their father. That child doesn't have to keep looking up to make sure their father is still holding their hand. The child trusts that the Father is there. In the same way, we need to trust that God is with us even when we don't constantly check for Him. Some of you are walking through a dark season and you feel like God is nowhere to be found. You think He has abandoned you, that He has left you to suffer. But listen to me, God is closest when we feel Him the least. Just because you don't see Him doesn't mean He's not working behind the scenes. Picture a seed buried underground. For a long time, nothing seems to be happening. It's dark, it's hidden, it looks lifeless. But deep beneath the surface, that seed is changing, growing, preparing to break through the soil. That's what God is doing in your life. You may not see it, but His presence is surrounding you, working in the unseen places. You may feel surrounded by trouble, surrounded by anxiety, surrounded by fear, but you are also surrounded by Him. There is a story in the Bible where Elisha's servant woke up one morning and saw an enemy army surrounding the city. He panicked, thinking they were doomed. But Elisha prayed, "Lord, open his eyes." And suddenly the servant saw what had been there all along, an army of angels surrounding them, greater than their enemies. Right now, if God were to open your eyes, you would see that you are not alone. You would see that you are surrounded by His love, by His protection, by His power. You would see that every step you take, He is right there beside you. And if you could truly grasp that, if you could truly believe it, you would never live in fear again. You would walk with confidence, knowing that no matter what comes your way, God is with you. Have you ever tried to escape something only to find it waiting for you wherever you go? Maybe it's a mistake you made, a painful memory, or a truth you don't want to face. No matter how far you run, it follows you like a shadow, never letting you truly escape. That's how it is with the presence of God. You can try to run, you can try to hide, you can try to drown out His voice with the noise of the world, but you cannot escape Him. Some of you have been running from God for years. You know He's calling you. You know He's drawing you closer. But instead of running to Him, you've been running away. You filled your life with distractions, convinced yourself that if you just stay busy enough, you won't have to deal with Him. But let me tell you something. You can't outrun God. Look at Jonah. God told him to go to Nineveh and preach a message of repentance. But Jonah didn't want to obey. He thought he had a better plan. So what did he do? He ran. He got on a boat and sailed in the opposite direction, thinking he could escape God's call. But what happened? A storm hit. The waves crashed. The sailors panicked. And in the middle of that chaos, Jonah realized something: you can't run from God. Some of you are in the middle of a storm right now, and you think it's just life being unfair. You think it's just bad luck. But what if the storm is God's way of calling you back? What if the waves you're fighting are actually His mercy, pushing you toward where you're supposed to be? Jonah was swallowed by a great fish, trapped in darkness for 3 days, and in that belly of the fish with nowhere left to run, he finally surrendered. He cried out to God, and God heard him. Some of you are in the belly of your own storm, feeling trapped, feeling hopeless. But listen to me, God has not abandoned you. He is still with you, even in your rebellion, even in your running. Maybe you're not running like Jonah, but you're running in other ways. You're running by avoiding the truth. You're running by numbing yourself with distractions, burying yourself in work, in relationships, in endless entertainment, anything to keep from facing what God is calling you to do. Maybe you're running because you think you're not worthy. You think God can't possibly want me after everything I've done. But let me tell you something. God doesn't call the perfect, He calls the willing. Look at Moses. He was a murderer. He ran away from his past, fled into the wilderness, built a new life where nobody knew his story. But then God showed up in a burning bush and said, "Moses, I'm not finished with you yet." Look at David. He committed terrible sins, yet he couldn't escape the presence of God. In Psalm 139, he wrote, "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there." Even if you run to the darkest places, even if you try to hide in your shame, God is already there. Some of you are running because you're afraid of what surrender means. You think if you say yes to God, you'll lose control. You think He'll ask you to give up everything you love. But listen to me, what you're afraid of losing is nothing compared to what you gain. A little boy was once holding a cheap plastic pearl necklace. He loved it. It was his favorite thing in the world. One night his father asked him, "Son, will you give me your necklace?" The boy hesitated. He loved that necklace. He didn't want to let it go. But eventually, with tears in his eyes, he handed it over. And do you know what his father did? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a real pearl necklace, one of great value, and placed it around his son's neck. That's what some of you are doing right now. You're clutching on to things that are holding you back, afraid to surrender to God because you think you'll lose everything. But what if He's waiting to give you something greater? What if the very thing you're running from is the thing that will set you free? Maybe you've been running from your calling. You felt a tug in your heart, a whisper telling you that you were made for more. But instead of stepping into it, you've been running in the opposite direction. Let me tell you something. God's call on your life will not change just because you ignore it. Look at Paul. He was actively fighting against God, persecuting Christians, convinced he was doing the right thing. But then, on the road to Damascus, he had an encounter with Jesus that changed everything. In one moment, his entire life was turned around. That's the power of God's presence. It will find you in your darkest hour and call you into something greater. You might be thinking, I've run too far. I've made too many mistakes. But let me tell you the truth. There is no such thing as too far for God. There is no sin too great, no past too messy, no failure too deep that His grace cannot reach you. A father once told his son, no matter what happens, no matter how far you go, you will always have a home here. That's what God is saying to you today. No matter how far you run, no matter how long you've been gone, I am still here. You can try to run from His love, but it will chase you down. You can try to run from His mercy, but it will cover you. You can try to run from His calling, but He will never stop pursuing you. It's time to stop running. It's time to turn around. Because the moment you do, you'll realize something. You were never alone. He was always there, waiting with open arms, whispering, "Come home." There are moments in life when the storm rages so fiercely that you feel like you're about to be swallowed whole. The waves crash around you, the winds howl, and everything you thought was stable begins to shake. Maybe right now you're in a storm of your own. Trouble at home, pressure at work, betrayal from someone you trusted, sickness in your body, or a mind overwhelmed with anxiety. You've tried to stay strong, but the weight of it all is too much. You're exhausted. You're barely holding on, but listen to me. God's presence brings peace in the storm. You may not feel it yet, but it is true. The storm that seems like it will destroy you is no match for the one who walks on water. The chaos that seems out of control is still under His control. Think about the disciples in the boat. They were experienced fishermen. They knew how to handle the sea, but that night the storm was different. The waves were bigger than they had ever seen. The wind was more violent than anything they had ever faced. The boat was filling with water and they thought they were about to die. But Jesus was there. And where was He? Asleep. Can you imagine that? The storm is raging, the boat is shaking, the disciples are screaming, and Jesus is at perfect peace. Why? Because He knew something they didn't. He knew that no storm could ever overpower the presence of God. The disciples woke Him up crying, "Lord, don't you care that we're perishing?" That's how some of you feel right now. You've been praying, but it seems like God is silent. You've been crying out, but it feels like He's asleep while your world falls apart. But hear me, just because He's silent doesn't mean He's absent. Jesus stood up, looked at the storm, and said, "Peace, be still." And instantly the wind stops, the waves calmed, the chaos surrendered to His voice. What if I told you that the same Jesus who calmed that storm is standing in your boat right now? What if I told you that He sees the waves in your life and He is speaking peace over them this very moment? Maybe your storm isn't a physical one. Maybe it's the storm in your mind, the racing thoughts, the constant anxiety, the battle between fear and faith. You lie awake at night, unable to shut off your mind, drowning in what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. But I want you to hear this. His presence brings peace even to the storms inside you. Have you ever seen a mother holding her crying baby? The child is screaming, afraid, restless. But the moment the mother wraps her arms around the baby and whispers, "Shh, I've got you," something happens. The child doesn't need all the answers. The child doesn't need to know how the problem will be solved. Just knowing that they are held is enough. That's what God does for us. He wraps his arms around us and says, "Shh, I've got you." And suddenly the storm loses its power, not because the situation has changed, but because his presence has changed us. Look at Daniel in the lion's den. The storm was real, hungry lions, a death sentence, no way out, but Daniel didn't panic. Why? Because he knew God was with him. And the lions who were supposed to devour him could do nothing. Look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. The fire was real, the heat was real, but what happened? A fourth man appeared in the fire, Jesus himself, and because of his presence, not a single hair on their heads was burned. Some of you are walking through the fire right now. Some of you are staring into the face of lions, and the fear is telling you, this is it. This is the end. But I need you to know something. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. When you stand in the lion's den, you will not be harmed, because his presence is with you. Sometimes God calms the storm immediately, like he did for the disciples. Other times he lets the storm rage, but gives us peace in the middle of it. The miracle isn't always that the storm stops. Sometimes the miracle is that we are unshaken while it rages. There's a story of a young boy who was on a plane with his father. They hit a terrible storm. The plane shook violently. People screamed. Fear filled the cabin. But the boy sat calmly in his seat, unbothered. Someone asked him, "Why aren't you afraid?" And the boy smiled and said, "Because my father is the pilot." That's the kind of peace that comes when you trust the presence of God. No matter how fierce the storm, no matter how high the waves, he is still in control. You don't have to fear. You don't have to live in anxiety. You don't have to let the storm define you, because even in the midst of chaos, his presence brings peace. There are moments in life when the silence feels unbearable, when the laughter of others sounds distant, like it's coming from a world you no longer belong to. Maybe you're surrounded by people, yet you feel invisible. Maybe your phone is full of contacts, yet there's no one you feel you can truly call. Maybe you sit in a crowded room, yet deep inside you feel utterly alone. Loneliness is one of the heaviest burdens a person can carry. It weighs on your heart. It whispers lies into your mind. It tells you that no one sees you, that no one cares, that you don't matter. It makes you question everything, your worth, your purpose, your place in this world. But listen to me, you are not alone. You have never been alone. Even in your most isolated moments, God is with you. Think about Hagar, the servant woman in the Bible, who was cast out into the wilderness, abandoned and left to die with her child. She had no one, she had nowhere to go, but in her moment of deepest despair, God showed up. He called her by name. He reminded her that he saw her, that she was not forgotten, and she gave him a name. God who sees me. Maybe that's where you are right now. You feel abandoned, overlooked, unseen, but I need you to know God sees you. You might say, but I don't feel him. I don't hear his voice. How can I believe he's with me when all I feel is emptiness? But isn't that what loneliness does? It tricks you into believing a lie. It makes you think that just because you feel alone, you are alone. But feelings are not truth. God's presence is not based on what you feel. It is based on his unshakable promise. He said in his word, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Not sometimes, not only when you feel worthy, not only when you get everything right, Never. Even when your friends walk away, even when your family doesn't understand you, even when the people you thought would always be there disappear, he remains. Think about the prodigal son. He ran away, wasted everything, ended up in a pit eating with pigs. He felt unworthy, ashamed, like he had no home to return to. But what happened when he finally turned around? His father didn't wait inside. He didn't stand at the door with crossed arms saying, "I told you so." No, the moment the father saw him in the distance, he ran to him. That's what God does for us. We can be lost, broken, sitting in the mess we made for ourselves, yet the moment we lift our eyes, he is already running toward us. Loneliness often comes from rejection. Maybe someone you loved left. Maybe someone you trusted betrayed you. Maybe the people you poured your heart into turned their backs on you. And now you've built walls around yourself, convinced that if you never let anyone in, you'll never be hurt again. But let me ask you this. What if your loneliness is not a punishment, but an invitation? What if the emptiness you feel is actually God calling you closer? What if the reason nothing else fills the void is because only he can? Think about Jesus. At the height of his ministry, crowds followed him everywhere. Thousands of people gathered to hear him speak, to see his miracles, to be in his presence. But on the night he was arrested, everyone left. Peter, the one who swore he would never leave, denied him 3 times. Judas, the one who had walked with him for years, betrayed him for money. The others, they ran in fear. And there, in the deepest moment of human suffering, Jesus experienced something that shakes the very heavens. He hung on the cross and cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He experienced separation from the Father so that you never would. He took on the ultimate loneliness so that you would never have to face it alone. That's why even when you feel forgotten, even when you feel abandoned, you are not. The cross is proof. His presence is the answer. Think about a child who is afraid of the dark. The shadows seem larger than life. The silence feels deafening. But what happens the moment a loving parent walks into the room? The fear disappears. The darkness no longer matters, not because the room has changed, but because the child is no longer alone. That is what the presence of God does. It doesn't always change our circumstances immediately, but it changes. It reminds us that we are not walking through this life by ourselves. Maybe right now you're sitting in a season of loneliness, wondering when things will change, when the ache will go away. But what if, instead of waiting for people to fill the void, you let God's presence fill it? He is not just a distant God in the heavens. He is right there with you. When you sit alone in your room, wondering if anyone notices your absence, he is there. When you drive in silence, feeling like no one would even care if you disappeared, he is there. When you scroll through your phone, seeing everyone else's perfect lives while yours feels empty, he is there. When you cry in the middle of the night, when your heart aches with a pain too deep for words, he is there. He doesn't just visit you when you're strong. He doesn't just show up when you have it all together. He's there in your weakness. He's there in your silence. He's there in your loneliness. You don't have to beg for his presence. You don't have to earn it. It is already surrounding you. And when you finally recognize that, when you finally open your heart to his presence, the loneliness that once crushed you will lose its power, because you will know the truth. You were never alone. There are battles you fought that you didn't even know about. Dangers that should have taken you out but didn't. Attacks from the enemy that were planned against you but never reached you. You think you're standing here today by accident? You think you survived all those storms by chance? No. His presence was your shield of protection. Some of you should have been destroyed by the things you went through. The heartbreak should have broken you beyond repair. The betrayal should have left you bitter forever. The accident should have killed you. The depression should have swallowed you whole. The attack on your mind should have left you completely lost. But here you are, still standing. Why? Because his presence covered you. Maybe you've been in a season where you feel vulnerable, like everything is coming against you at once. The enemy is whispering lies, telling you that you're defenseless, that you're alone in the battle, that you won't make it this time. But I came to tell you, you are not unprotected. You have a shield that cannot be broken, a fortress that cannot be breached, a God who stands between you and every weapon formed against you. Look at Psalm 91. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Do you know what that means? It means when you are in His presence, you are covered. The enemy might try to attack, but he can't reach you. The weapons might form, but they won't prosper. The storm might rage, but it won't destroy you. Think about Job. The enemy wanted to attack him, to tear his life apart. But before he could even touch Job, he had to get permission from God. Why? Because Job was protected. The enemy couldn't just walk into his life and do whatever he wanted. There was a hedge around him. And guess what? That same hedge is around you. Some of you have no idea how many times the enemy tried to take you out. But God said, not this one, not today. Think about Daniel in the lion's den. He was thrown into a pit full of hungry lions, a death sentence. But did the lions touch him? No. Why? Because the presence of God shut their mouths. Think about the Israelites at the Red Sea. The Egyptian army was coming to destroy them. It looked hopeless. There was no escape. But what happened? God's presence stood between them and their enemies. A pillar of fire came down, a wall of protection that their enemies could not cross. That is what His presence does. It places a barrier between you and the things that seek to destroy you. Maybe right now you feel surrounded by fear, by danger, by problems that seem impossible to escape. But you need to remember who is surrounding you. The enemy might be near, but God is nearer. The trouble might be real, but so is your defender. A child once asked his father, "Daddy, what would you do if a lion tried to attack me?" The father smiled and said, "That lion would have to go through me first." That's exactly how God protects you. Before the attack ever reaches you, it has to go through Him first. And nothing gets through unless He allows it, and if He allows it, then He has already planned your victory. Think about the 3 Hebrew boys in the fiery furnace. The fire was turned up 7 times hotter than normal. It was so intense that even the guards who threw them in were burned alive. But what happened? The fire didn't touch them. Not a single hair on their heads was burned. Not even the smell of smoke was on them. Why? Because the Son of God was in the fire with them. Some of you are walking through fire right now. But you are not alone. And because His presence is with you, what was meant to destroy you will only refine you. The fire won't burn you, it will purify you. The storm won't sink you, it will strengthen you. The battle won't break you, it will build you. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to walk in fear, wondering when the next attack is coming, because you are covered. His presence is your shield, your fortress, your strong tower. The arrows may fly, but they will not reach you. The weapons may be formed, but they will not succeed. The storm may come, but you will not be shaken. The enemy can try all he wants, but he can't touch what God has covered. Hey everyone, welcome back to Tech Talks. I'm Alex, and today we're diving into the incredible journey of voice AI and its impact on our daily lives. There is something about the presence of God that changes everything. When He steps in, nothing can remain the same. Darkness has to flee, chains have to break, old mindsets have to shift, wounds begin to heal, fear loses its grip. Because where His presence is, transformation is inevitable. Some of you have been stuck in the same cycle for years. The same struggles, the same pain, the same burdens weighing you down. You've tried to change, but no matter how hard you try, you end up back in the same place. You feel like you're running in circles, trapped in a life that refuses to shift. But let me tell you something. The answer is not in your effort. The answer is in His presence. Think about Moses. He was just an ordinary man, a shepherd living in the wilderness. carrying the weight of his past mistakes. He had failed. He had run away. He was convinced that his life would never be anything more than what it was. But then he encountered the presence of God. In a moment, everything changed. A burning bush appeared, yet it was not consumed. And out of that fire, God spoke his name. Do you know what that means? Moses thought his story was over, but God had other plans. That's what his presence does. It calls you out of who you used to be and into who you were always meant to be. Moses walked into that moment a shepherd, but he walked out a deliverer. He walked in unsure, but he walked out anointed. He walked in full of fear, but he walked out with a purpose that would shake nations. Some of you are standing at your own burning bush moment right now. God is calling your name. He's saying, I have more for you. You don't have to stay stuck. You don't have to live in the past. My presence will transform you. Look at Jacob. He spent his entire life being known as a deceiver, a trickster, someone who always had to manipulate his way through life. But then one night he wrestled with God, and in that encounter something changed. God didn't just give him a new blessing, he gave him a new identity. He said, your name will no longer be Jacob. From now on, you will be called Israel. One moment in his presence, and he was no longer who he used to be. One encounter, and everything shifted. Some of you have been carrying labels that people placed on you. Failure, not good enough, broken, unworthy. But let me tell you, when you step into his presence, those labels fall off. God is not calling you by your past. He is calling you by your purpose. Maybe you've been battling addiction, struggling with habits that won't let you go. Maybe your mind has been under attack, filled with negativity, fear, and doubt. Maybe your heart has been weighed down by bitterness and unforgiveness. But when you let his presence in, transformation begins. Look at Saul. He was a persecutor of Christians. He was filled with hatred, convinced he was doing the right thing by destroying the followers of Jesus. But then he encountered the presence of God on the road to Damascus. A bright light knocked him to the ground. The voice of Jesus called his name. And in that moment, everything changed. The man who once hunted believers became the man who spread the gospel across the world. He went into that encounter as Saul, but he came out as Paul. And that's what happens in his presence. Who you were is no match for who he is making you to be. Some of you have been trying to fix yourselves. You've been trying to clean up your life before coming to God, thinking you have to be perfect before he'll accept you. But transformation doesn't happen before his presence. It happens because of his presence. A butterfly doesn't become a butterfly by trying harder. It doesn't force itself to grow wings. It simply surrenders to the process. It allows the transformation to happen from the inside out. And that's what God is doing in you. You may not see the change right away. You may feel like nothing is happening. But when you stay in his presence, transformation is taking place deep within you. Old things are passing away. New things are being birthed. The person you thought you'd always be is fading, and the person God created you to be is emerging. His presence doesn't just modify your behavior, it changes your very nature. It doesn't just help you cope, it makes you new. Where there was once fear, there will be confidence. Where there was once shame, there will be boldness. Where there was once brokenness, there will be healing. Because when his presence comes, transformation is not just possible, it is inevitable. God's presence is always there. It surrounds you. It calls to you. But the question is, how will you respond? You see, God never forces himself on anyone. He doesn't barge in uninvited. He doesn't demand your attention. He simply reveals himself and waits. He waits for your response. Many people desire his presence, but not everyone responds to it. Some hear his voice but ignore it. Some feel the pull of his spirit but resist it. Some stand on the edge of transformation but refuse to step in. Think about the rich young ruler. He stood in front of Jesus, the Son of God, the very presence of heaven walking in human form. He had a chance to step into something greater, to experience a life beyond anything he had known. Jesus looked at him with love and gave him an invitation. Sell what you have, give to the poor, and follow me. But what did he do? He walked away. He had the opportunity of a lifetime to follow Jesus, to be in his presence, to experience the supernatural, but he chose to hold on to what he had instead. How many times has God called you deeper, but you held back? How many moments have you felt his presence, yet refused to respond? His presence requires a response. He stepped into an encounter that changed his life forever. Or look at Isaiah. He had a vision where he saw the Lord high and lifted up. He was overwhelmed by the holiness of God. He could have shrunk back. He could have stayed silent. But what did he do? He responded. He cried out, "Here am I, send me." His response unlocked his calling. God's presence is not just something to admire. It is something to engage with. Think about Peter. He and the other disciples were in a boat, and they saw Jesus walking on the water. Most of them just sat there in shock. But Peter, he responded. He said, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Come." At that moment, Peter had a choice: stay in the boat or step into the impossible. Some of you are sitting in the boat. You see what God is doing. You feel his presence, but you're hesitating. You're afraid to step out. You're afraid of what might happen if you fully surrender. But what if Peter had never stepped out? What if he had let fear hold him back? He would have never walked on water. He would have never experienced the supernatural. That's what happens when you respond to his presence. You step into things that are impossible on your own. Look at the woman with the issue of blood. She had been suffering for 12 long years. She had tried everything. She had spent all her money looking for a cure. But then she heard that Jesus was near. She could have stayed where she was. She could have let the crowd block her. She could have given up. But no, she responded. She pushed through the crowd. She reached out. She touched the hem of his garment. And in that moment, everything changed. Jesus turned around and said, "Who touched me?" The disciples were confused. There were people all around him. But Jesus knew this was different. This was not just a casual encounter. This was someone who responded with faith. Many people were around Jesus that day, but only one walked away healed. Why? Because only one reached out. Only one responded. Some of you are waiting for God to do something in your life, but God is waiting for you to respond. His presence is already here. His Spirit is already moving. His arms are already open. But will you step forward? Will you press in? Think about blind Bartimaeus. He was sitting by the roadside when he heard that Jesus was passing by. He could have stayed quiet. He could have let the moment pass. But instead he cried out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." The crowd told him to be quiet. They tried to shut him down. But what did he do? He cried out even louder. And because of his response, Jesus stopped. Do you realize how powerful that is? Jesus stopped. The Son of God, the one who holds the universe together, stopped in his tracks because of the response of one blind man. He called Bartimaeus forward and said, "What do you want me to do for you?" And in that moment, his sight was restored. Not because Jesus randomly decided to heal him, but because Bartimaeus responded to his presence. There are some breakthroughs that only happen when you respond. There are some miracles that only come when you reach out. God's presence is not something to take lightly. When he moves, you must move. When he calls, you must answer. When he knocks, you must open the door. How many times have you felt his presence calling you deeper, but you ignored it? How many times has he stirred your heart, but you brushed it off? What if today is your moment? What if right now God is calling you to respond? You must decide, will you stay where you are, or will you step into his presence? Will you hold back, or will you reach out? Because when you truly respond, everything changes. There comes a moment in life when you realize that nothing in this world can satisfy the deepest hunger of your soul. Money won't do it. Success won't do it. Applause won't do it. You can chase after every dream, climb every mountain, and still feel empty, because what your heart is searching for is not found in things, it is found in His presence. There is a reason why no amount of achievements ever feel like enough, why people who have everything still feel lost. Because you were not created to live disconnected from the one who made you. You were designed for something greater, and that greatness is found in Him. You see, the world will try to tell you that power, fame, and wealth will fulfill you. But have you ever noticed that the people who seem to have it all are often the most broken? Why? Because they gained the world but lost their soul. God's presence is not just another option in life. It is the only thing that truly satisfies. You can run after temporary things, but they will never give you permanent peace. You can chase the approval of others, but it will never replace the love of God. You can try to fill your emptiness with distractions, but at the end of the day, only His presence can fill the void. The greatest moments in history were shaped by those who chose to walk with God. Look at David, a shepherd boy who became a king, not because he was the strongest, not because he was the most qualified, but because he was a man after God's own heart. Look at Joseph, betrayed, enslaved, imprisoned, yet he rose to power because the Lord was with him. Look at Paul, once a persecutor of Christians, transformed into one of the greatest apostles to ever walk the earth, because he encountered the presence of God. The difference between an ordinary life and an extraordinary life is not talent, not connections, not luck. It is God's presence. When you carry His presence, doors open that no man can shut. When you walk with Him, battles are won before they even begin. When you respond to Him, you step into a destiny greater than you ever imagined. So many people spend their whole lives searching for purpose. They chase after one thing after another, hoping that the next big achievement, the next relationship, the next success will finally make them feel whole. But true purpose is not found in what you do. It is found in who you are connected to. And when you are connected to Him, you stop living a life of survival and start living a life of significance. Some of you have been wandering for too long, searching, waiting, wondering when things will change. But let me tell you, the change begins when you step into His presence. If you want transformation, draw near to Him. If you want strength, abide in Him. If you want peace, rest in Him. His presence is not a place you visit, it is a life you live. It is the atmosphere of victory. It is the source of power. It is the key to everything. There is a reason why people say one moment in God's presence can change everything, because it's true. One moment in His presence can heal years of brokenness. One encounter with Him can turn your entire life around. Some of the greatest legends of faith were not the smartest, not the richest, not the most talented, but they were the ones who chose to walk in His presence. Moses said, "If your presence does not go with us, do not send us from here." Why? Because he knew that without God's presence, nothing else mattered. Listen to me, you were never meant to do life alone. You were never meant to fight battles by yourself. You were never meant to carry burdens that only God can lift. You don't have to be strong enough. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to figure everything out. All you have to do is stay in His presence. Because when you do, everything shifts. Fear turns into faith. Weakness turns into strength. Confusion turns into clarity. The greatest athletes, the greatest warriors, the greatest leaders in history all have one thing in common. They refused to quit. They refused to back down. They refused to let fear win. But let me tell you something. When you walk with God, you have something even greater than determination. You have divine power backing you up. And when you walk in that power, when you live in His presence, nothing can stop you. No storm, no enemy, no setback, no failure, nothing. Because if God is for you, who can be against you? This is your moment. This is your time. This is your invitation to step into something greater. Do not settle for a life without his presence. Do not settle for ordinary when you were created for extraordinary. Do not let another day go by without responding to the one who is calling you. His presence is here. The only question is, will you step in?